Hello, everyone. I am Gigi Howard, host of the podcast Drinks in the Library, where every week I interview a guest about their favorite book and we pair it with a drink. And I am thrilled to be back here tonight with you and my besties, EveryLibrary, the only political action committee for libraries in the United States. EveryLibrary this week is proudly presenting award-winning voices, a special 3-night virtual event series celebrating acclaimed authors whose work inspires reflection, courage, and connection. These live conversations highlight writers whose award-winning books explore identity, resilience, and the freedom to tell powerful stories. All right, and so I am here with you tonight to talk to CB Barnard. CB has written this amazing book. Hi, CB, good to have you. And you go by Chris, so we're going to call you Chris for that. But I have Ordinary Bear here with me. It was the 2025 Barry Award for Best First Novel, set against the stark beauty of Alaska and the gritty streets of Portland. This darkly humorous and deeply human story follows Farley, a hapless oil company investigator whose life is upended by loss, guilt, and a desperate search for redemption. So love it so much. Can't wait to talk to you about that, Chris. All right. So, Chris, this is your second novel, third book. We're talking about Ordinary Bear tonight, but you've also written Small Animals Caught in Traps, which came out in 2023. I love that title. And then also the nonfiction Chasing Alaska, a portrait of the lost frontier then and now. That was a Publishers Weekly top 10 travel pick, Amazon bestseller, and finalist for the Oregon Book Award in nonfiction. Ordinary Bear was awarded the Barry Award for First Crime or Mystery Novel in 2025. All right, so Chris has lived in about 9 states. You built a boat. Yeah. Want to hear more about that? Walked tens of thousands of miles with his dogs and written about everything from fly fishing to wolves to maritime piracy. For much of his adult life, he called Alaska and Oregon home, but now could be found on Rhode Island coast with his wife, Kim, and their dog, Nessie, his feet in the ocean, his head in the clouds. All right, Chris, it's lovely to be here with you tonight. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and of EveryLibrary. The advocacy work the organization does, and the podcast is just such a gift to writers, readers, and literature in general.
Oh, thank you so much for myself and also EveryLibrary. Love hearing that so much. All right, so we've got so much to cover. Let's talk about Ordinary Bear. What is this story about?
At its heart, it's a crime novel, but it's not your typical detective novel or your typical crime novel even. I would argue that I didn't set out to write a crime novel. I set out to write kind of an odyssey novel. So it follows this guy, Farley, who goes through this kind of unimaginable tragedy in his life. And it just breaks him. It breaks his soul, it breaks his heart, it breaks his body. Everything changes for him. So he moves from the Arctic, where it happens, to his hometown of Portland, Oregon, kind of nursing his wounds and punishing himself. He's suffering from grief. He's suffering from guilt. And he meets some neighbors of his, a single mom and her daughter. And when the daughter goes missing, Farley gets kind of roped into the task of trying to find her. So it becomes a little bit, it like parallels some of the hallmarks of a detective novel, but it's really an odyssey novel. He's kind of led by guides through all these different stages of the journey. Instead of, like Dante's Inferno, instead of Virgil, he's led by this collection of quirky Portland characters, and each one carries him a little bit further toward his goal, and he learns something from each of them along the way. And he's really trying to save her and trying to save what's left of his own humanity. It's kind of a redemption novel as well.
Yeah. And what came to you first with this one? Was it the storyline? Was it Farley himself?
It's really hard to talk about this book without spoilers. The title is a little bit of a giveaway, but there's a scene that happens about 20 pages in, the scene where everything changes for Farley.
Yeah.
And that scene was the first thing that came to me. It's funny, I was on a panel at the New Hampshire Book Festival with some other great mystery writers. And somebody in the audience asked the question if we knew the endings to our books when we started writing them. And I kind of joked that I didn't even know the beginning of mine when I started it, because I knew this scene that happened somewhere in the middle of the book. So I had to write my way into that scene as well as out of that scene. And that's how the idea for Farley was born. And once Farley got into that mess, I realized it was an Odyssey novel, and I realized that I could have some fun with the tradition of a detective novel.
Yeah, absolutely. And also talking about the Barry Award, which for our audience is from the editorial staff of Deadly Pleasures magazine. What was it like to win that award? How did you celebrate? Tell us all of it.
It was wildly unexpected. Deadly Pleasures has been great. The staff there for years and years have tirelessly reviewed books, supported writers, supported books. And I was a fan of their work. But because I didn't consider myself a crime writer, really, it came out of left field for me to be nominated for this award. So my wife and I went down to New Orleans for the awards ceremony. And it was at the National World War II Museum. We'd been to New Orleans about 10 years ago as just visitors, and we visited that museum. So it was a really cool experience to have the award ceremony be in this incredibly moving place with all this historical significance for the country. And when they called my name and I got to get up on that stage and address all the people in the audience, some of whom are writers whose work I've just admired my entire life, it was a pretty remarkable moment for me. And because it's a reader voted award, it means that much more to me. I'm not going to lie and say I don't read my reviews or I don't care about critics. I do. I absolutely do. But I really write for readers, because when I was a kid, they'd let me loose in libraries and I'd read books and I would connect with them in ways that let me travel through books, let me learn that my lived experience wasn't unique to me. And that's how I learned that other people went through these things that I thought were, things that made me weird, but they just were universal things. And being able to connect with books that way, I became a writer because I wanted people to connect with my books. So to win a reader voted award just meant the world to me. And I'm incredibly grateful to everybody who nominated me for it and everybody who voted for it.
Yeah, I mean, that is such an honor to have your readers go to bat for you like that. It really shows that they love you. Absolutely. Talking about libraries a little bit. So tell us about that, your first experiences in them and reading and your love of them.
I was the weird kid who knew what he wanted to be. I wanted to be a writer. And because I didn't succeed at it for quite a while, I think I was the weird adult as well who knew what he wanted to be but wasn't. But as a kid, when growing up, I'm not going to tell you what decade it was, but growing up back then, they would my mom would work and I'd head out with an uncle or an aunt and my cousins, and they'd take us to the library and let us spend some time there and pick out books. And that was like my favorite thing, to just be loose in a library and being able to wander the stacks. And it just so much knowledge and entertainment, and so much, that's how I learned empathy from books. It's how I learned so many things. And to this day, that's still the best way for me to learn things. So libraries are such an important part of my life, but they're also important to communities. And I hate to see, I think we're losing sight of that. And I think that's scary, because communities are in critical danger right now. The sense of community is in danger, and libraries are such a hub for that.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I agree with you. We're part of the community, and young readers like yourself, I mean, look at the impact it had on you, and now you're an award-winning author. So it's amazing. Talking about your lived experiences, how did they impact your writing, who you are when, you're creating these stories, you're thinking?
I mean, fiction is, it's like making hot dogs, right? Your entire life goes into it, but it's unrecognizable when it comes out on the other side.
Okay, yeah.
So my books are full of my lived experiences and my thoughts and my insecurities and my emotions, I guess, but you wouldn't always, I mean, it's not like it's a one-to-one. You wouldn't recognize them. Even people who know me sometimes will make guesses about what's me and what's not in there. But writing is a way to understand the world, just like reading is. Sometimes it's a way to escape the world. Sometimes it's a way to understand the world. And I think we need both those things, because the world is something that is very difficult to understand and often something that you need escape from.
Yeah. And talking about like the setting in Ordinary Bear, you've got the Arctic and then you've got Portland. How did that, what came first, the setting or the story itself? They have played such a role in it.
Well, considering it has polar bears in it at pivotal moments, it could only take place in the Arctic for parts of it. But I was living in Portland. My wife and I lived there twice for about 15 years. And I was living there. I actually wrote it here in Rhode Island, but we had just left Oregon, and I had just finished Small Animals Caught in Traps. And I think I was probably missing Portland a little bit at the time. But if you're going to write an Odyssey novel full of quirky characters that help your main protagonist through a sort of underworld, it's hard to pick a better city than Portland, because Portland just draws quirky characters. Portland breeds quirky characters. Portland punches above its weight in quirky characters. It's just such a great place. And some people read the book and they think it's not the greatest picture of Portland because it's gritty. But to me, it's a love letter for Portland. The grittiness of that city is part of what I love about it. And I think true Portlanders will read this book and recognize that it's a love letter to Portland, as it is to Alaska, because I left a big piece of my heart up there when I lived up there and when I left.
And you've written quite a bit about the wilderness and the great outdoors. What is it? And you've built this boat. What is it that draws you outdoors that you love about it so much?
Increasingly, it feels important to me to get away from screens, to get away from, we have sort of an epidemic of unsilent places in this world. We've made it very difficult to go places where you can't hear phones or cars or planes overhead or noise. And I think we lose something when we lose sight of that, or sight's the wrong word. That's a different sense entirely, but you know what I mean. When we lose the ability to truly get away from things, I think we lose a part of ourselves. And it's always been important to me to celebrate that, but also just, I really connect with place. Place is incredibly important in my writing, and it's incredibly important in my life. And just connecting with the landscape and being able to go out and interact with that has always been something I've needed in my life, and that hasn't changed.
Yeah. Well, hang on. So what inspired the building of the boat? I have to know about the boat. I'm stuck on it.
All right. So long story short, my first book, Chasing Alaska, I moved to Alaska in 1999, not knowing that I had an ancestor who had gone there 100 years earlier. As I started to research his life, I found out about it secondhand. And as I started to research it, I found out that he had been an Arctic explorer who had spent 22 years exploring Alaska and the Canadian Arctic. He had spent 11 years frozen over. I found 5 different obituaries for him, because every time they thought he was dead, he would sail back into Nome. He had a species of wolf and a bunch of Canadian and Alaskan landmarks named after him. Mm-hmm. So as I kind of retraced his route and wrote about his life and my life up there 100 years apart, as a love letter to Alaska, I found the remains of the ship he had built that he had used for his exploration. And I brought some of the wood back to my house in Portland. And for the epilogue of the book, I built a boat using some of the wood from his ship. The picture had been hanging over my desk while I researched the book for 14 years. Wow. And I named the boat Epilogue because it was the epilogue of the book. So that was kind of that closing chapter on his life and mine. And, you know, it was a gift to mix my family history with what I do for a living.
That is amazing. Do you ever feel like he is with you because you have his boat still?
I sold the boat, Gigi.
Okay, well, it's okay.
I sold the boat and bought a bigger boat.
That's okay. I love it. Now we've got the new boat.
I believe he's still with the boat. just with somebody else.
Yeah, I love that bringing someone with you. I just feel like we all kind of live on, and yeah, that's so cool.
Oh, absolutely. I think totems from our past are really important. In my office, you can't see it here, but I'm kind of surrounded by things from my grandparents and my parents and ancestors, because I feel like that's just important.
Yeah, they're always with you for sure. So, what is the strangest thing that you've ever researched for a project?
Oh, like most writers, I think you don't ever want anybody checking your browser history, especially if you do write about crime.
You're always in an incognito mode.
Yes.
Tip number one.
For me, it's all over the map, I think, because going from writing about Arctic exploration back in the time of, when parts of Alaska were still blank spots on the map, going from that to researching the homeless crisis in Portland for Ordinary Bear, to kind of male depression for Small Animals Caught in Traps. I think my research is probably all over the map, but like anybody who does research online, you start to hyperlink and you end up down a rabbit hole you weren't expecting to go down that has nothing to do with what you set out for. And suddenly like 2 hours have passed and you're fascinated learning about something you had no intention to learn about. And honestly, some of those things you wish you hadn't.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Might be serious.
Some bells can't be unrung, right?
Yeah. What is your writing process like? You research first, you start writing and then research?
Yeah, I'm a seat of the pants guy. I write in the morning really early before I see the dog that needs to be walked or the bills that need to be paid or the dishes that need to be washed, because it's easiest to kind of step from bed right into my own head at that point of the day. And I will just jump right into it. And then after, I will go back and do research to kind of get things back on track or figure out what's right, what's wrong. But for me, story and character drive me forward, and then everything else is just kind of set pieces that I need to set the stage. But nonfiction is different, obviously. Writing the Alaska book was a completely different process. But for fiction, story and character are that's what drives me forward. And then James, I'm going to wildly misquote him, but James Michener said something like, "I'm an okay writer, I'm a great rewriter," and that's kind of how I am. Like my first draft, it's just get it on the page, and then I will go back and spend an embarrassingly long time rewriting and many drafts. But for me, it's so much less intimidating to face an edit than it is to face a blank page. So I just try and get things on the page as quickly as I can and then take it from there. Okay.
That's great advice for sure. I wanted to do a little thought experiment with you if you're game. So I host the podcast Drinks in the Library. So we pair everything with a drink. If your writing routine were a drink, what would it be, and what's in it? What are we calling it?
It's funny you asked this, and I'm going to demand that you invite me on that podcast sometime so we can have a drink together. But
you're invited.
When Small Animals came out, I'm not a good social media guy, and I was thinking of ways to promote the book. And my wife and I came up with the idea of creating a cocktail to go with the book. And I wish I had known about your podcast at the time, because that would have, you had so many good ideas, and listening to your podcast since then so much, I've learned how to pair books with drinks. And I hadn't even thought of that before this time. So I do think there's something to that. But for me, I think both Farley and Lewis, the character in Small Animals Caught in Traps, big whiskey drinkers. And that is probably the most direct one-to-one between me outside the books and me in the books. I like whiskey.
All right. So now when your friends ask, like, what's really you? Now we know it's the whiskey.
It's the whiskey. Yep. My friends don't have to ask that question, though, Gigi.
Yeah, they know. They're with you. Talking about like Small Animals and Ordinary Bears. Small Animals is literary fiction. Ordinary Bear is more mystery thriller. Yes, I love it. All right, I'm going to make you have a choice. Which is your preferred to write? What's your preferred genre to write in?
I'm going to reject the conceit because I think genre is a conversation for book marketers to have, not a conversation for writers to have. I think that the idea of genre is restricting and, or limiting rather. And I think the idea that mysteries and crime novels can't be literary, or that literary books can't be plot driven, I just reject that idea entirely. I think Ordinary Bear it's a literary novel, literary fiction, but it's really got the heart of a detective story. And I think that a lot of the good detective and crime books that I've read have. I don't want to be rude, Gigi, but I'm going to reject the premise of the question.
Accepted. I appreciate the thought on it. I thought it would be fun to see if it caused like kill your darlings moment, but I love it. Thinking on that, so what is bad advice that you've been given about writing that you would like to also reject?
Oh man, write about what you know. I think, again, that's also restricting. I think you should certainly tap what you know, and I think you should learn about things you want to write about. But if you never write about something you don't know about yet, you're not ever challenging yourself. And where's the fun in that? And I can sort of back this up to your last question, because every time I start a new book, I want it to be different enough from the one before it that I'm challenging myself. I want to not necessarily try a different genre if I'm going to reject genre, but if my last two books were dark, maybe I want one to be funny. Or if I write one that's crime driven, maybe I want to write one that's more, family driven. So I think writing about what you know is important, but you got to challenge yourself as well. So that is one of the most classic pieces of advice people give writers: write about what you know.
Yeah.
But don't only write about what you know. Now, that said, you could flip that on its back, because people have clearly written books that they knew nothing about what they were writing about, and that comes across, and you want to come across as authentic. But yeah. I do think you should feel free to learn something new and write about it.
Okay. Well, that's excellent advice for everybody aspiring out there. Also, kind of on that flow, I guess, what are, let's say, 3 of the most surprising things that you've learned as being a writer?
The publishing world can feel like a machine engineered to crush the human soul, but it can also be the most amazing thing on the planet that lifts people high. Yeah. And it can often be both in the same day. I was not prepared for how much books can change your life as a writer. Like, I knew how much they could change your life as a reader, but having a book out in the world and the people it brings into your life and the experiences it brings into your life can just completely catch you flat-footed sometimes, in good ways and surprising ways. So it's really been a gift, but the process of getting there, I could, for years, I probably could have wallpapered a Costco with rejection letters. And that's just part of the process, but you gotta show up every day. And that's the other surprising thing I've learned, I think, which is that you need to show up every day, but often that's not enough. If you're 5'2", you can play basketball for 10 hours a day and probably never learn to dunk or never make the NBA. And I think that's true of writing as well, but you need to keep your eyes on the idea that this is what you want to do, and you're going to do it one way or the other, and show up every day. And I think what I learned in that process was that I can do that. When I want to do something, I'm not going to stop trying until I've left everything trying,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, was that 3 or was that 2? I think that was 2.
I think you've still got one more, and I'm going to hold you to it.
Oh, one more. Ask me the question again?
The most surprising things that you've learned. And the first 2 were excellent.
The most surprising thing I learned is that, Wow, it's a really good question. I don't know. I want to circle back to that one.
We'll circle back.
Let me flip it around. What's the most surprising thing you've learned doing these shows?
Everything that you were saying, honestly, so it resonates with me. I think like the connections that you make with other people is really the big value. I thought I was getting into this because I loved books, and I do, but honestly, the connections that I've made, meeting people like yourself, I met like the most amazing people, and that's been amazing. I loved it.
No, that's great. I'm gonna steal that one. I'm gonna +1 that one.
Okay. All right, great. We came to 3 collectively. Yeah, and it's all about the creative process. And I think honestly, just the act of sitting in your chair and being creative, and like even when it's hard and scary, sometimes that's the thing people don't understand. They're like, well, it's scary, so I'm not going to do it. And if you're not scared, you're not pushing yourself. You're not learning anything.
Yeah, that's absolutely the time to do it, is when you're most scared of it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what I've learned. I also wanted to ask you, you knew you always wanted to be a writer. And so who are some of the writers that you look up to, perhaps, and why?
I think anybody who is writing, I look up to, because it really is such a hard thing to do. I mean, it's not hard like curing cancer hard or digging ditches hard. It's hard like there are a million reasons not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you do it because you love books. And I admire anybody who has that feeling. That said, there are writers whose books I will always buy, although some of them are no longer with us, so I've bought them all already. I was a big fan of Robert Stone. He was just a fantastic novelist. Sarah Hall, the British novelist, she's got a new book out. She is just an astonishment. She is such a good writer. Anything she writes, I will buy. An Australian writer, Tim Winton, I love. His books, you can see some of his DNA in Ordinary Bear, I think, because he wrote a book called The Riders that was a mystery that wasn't a mystery, and like it just kind of reframed what a mystery could be for me. Ron Hansen did the same thing with his book Atticus. My friend Kristen Bear writes some amazing novels. She's got a new one out and called Clementine Crane, Would Prefer Not To. And Kristen is the one who taught me that you need to be fearless in your writing. And that is one of the things that has served me best in writing, is just approaching something fearlessly. When I teach occasionally at conferences or festivals, I tell students, let other readers, writers, critics, reviewers, people into your life, but never let them into your head. And you need to do that when you sit down to write. You need to not be thinking about how are people going to read this? What is my mom going to think when she reads this? You need to just be fearless when you're putting it on the page. And the writers I think I've admired most in this world are the ones who do that. They write something that will shock you. Not necessarily because it's shocking or scary, but because it's honest.
Yeah.
And being honest on the page is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're coming to an end, but we have the important question. What are you working on now?
I don't like to talk about this, and I'm going to tell you why. Ideas are like flames. You get a little spark and you need to protect it and nurture it. And if I tell you what I'm working on and your eyebrow goes up, I'm going to be lying in bed tonight thinking, why did her eyebrow go up? Was that a bad idea? Does she think that's a stupid idea? And I'm too insecure to put myself at risk like that. I need to protect my ideas until I'm ready to share them.
Okay. So we'll just have to stay tuned.
Stay tuned. There you go.
Stay tuned. Chris, this has been amazing talking with you. Congratulations again on your award. Everybody who's watching right now, you can get Ordinary Bear, Small Animals, or Chasing Alaska. Get all 3, bundle. This has been lovely. I want to thank you for being here, and everybody watching. Tune in again tomorrow night. We've got more award-winning authors with EveryLibrary this week. But we're tuning out for now. Chris, this has been wonderful. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. You too, Gigi.
Thank you.